In November 2021, an Iraqi-Italian restoration team working in the basement storage of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad opened a wooden crate marked Tel Al-Hiba, 1968 season, unclassified material.
Tel Al-Hiba is the modern name for the ancient Sumerian city of Lagash, one of the largest urban centers of the 3rd millennium BCE. The 1968 excavations were interrupted by political crisis. The materials shipped to Baghdad, the crates sealed and placed in a basement where they survived 3 wars, the 2003 looting and the flooding of the lower levels in 2015. Inside the crate were 11 clay tablets in standard condition, fragmented, salt-crusted, partial cuneiform preservation. 10 turned out to be administrative records, grain accounting, labor allocation, temple supplies. The 11th tablet was different, larger, thicker, dense text in 3 columns on both sides. When conservator Marco de Gregorio carefully removed the salt layer from the obverse, the first column was not an economic text, it was a narrative. But before we continue, if you enjoy ancient mysteries and hidden historical discoveries like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this story becomes even stranger from here. De Gregorio photographed the tablet and sent the images to Iraqi State Board of Antiquities epigraphist Ali al-Hashimi, who began preliminary transliteration that same evening. 3 days later, al-Hashimi called the team leader and said the transliteration probably contained an error because the text did not describe the destruction of Lagash or a temple ritual. It described a mass evacuation underground. The tablet used the term Ug-Shushi, which in Sumerian administrative vocabulary means the gathering of people for relocation, and specified a number, 25 Shah. In the ancient sexagesimal counting system, a single Shah represented 3,600. That means 25 Shah equaled 90,000 people. According to the tablet, 90,000 individuals were gathered together and taken beneath the earth. And the second column explained the terrifying reason why. It described what remained on the surface after the final stone gates had been shut from the inside. At first, Ali al-Hashimi thought his translation had to be wrong. But after reviewing the symbols again and again, he realized there was no mistake, and the most disturbing section was still hidden beneath layers of salt on the reverse side of the tablet. It took conservators nearly 2 weeks to expose the 3rd column. What it described was even darker. It told of what waited above when the underground survivors finally reopened the doors, and why so few of those who returned to the surface ever came back below again. The second column begins with a phrase never seen in any known Sumerian hymn, lamentation, or myth. The phrase was Anta Namtagal Ede, translated roughly as the great affliction descending from above. Normally, the Sumerian word Namtag referred to disease, suffering, punishment, or disaster. It appears in countless medical and religious records. But on this tablet, the word was altered by a special determinative used only for living beings, humans, animals, or gods. In other words, whatever descended from the sky was not described as weather or a natural catastrophe. The scribe classified it as something alive. The text then spends 11 lines describing this entity. At first, al-Hashimi believed the lines were too damaged to read correctly, but the problem was not damage. The descriptions were simply too precise, too unsettling to accept easily. The affliction moved across the land in sweeping waves. The verb used was dal, meaning to hover or fly. It emitted a sound described as anir gugol, a massive wailing roar that terrified animals into stampedes and caused children to suddenly fall silent. The text never says cities were attacked or destroyed. Instead, Entire populations abandoned them before the affliction even arrived. That distinction is important. People fled because its approach alone created panic. The verb used for the deaths of those who stayed behind was ush, meaning to kill, but it was paired with the terms bara and zi, meaning from the outside, and life breath. The translation becomes chilling. People were killed externally by the removal of their life force. The victims were not burned, drowned, or physically wounded. Their bodies remained intact, yet life was somehow taken from them. The tablet says, "Many died exactly where they stood. Some collapsed while walking. Others remained seated, lifeless but untouched." To the Bronze Age scribe, it appeared as though something invisible had extracted the breath directly from their bodies, and then the account becomes even more disturbing, because the tablet continues by describing what happened after death. The first column focuses on the evacuation itself, and it reads less like mythology and more like a structured emergency operation. The ruling council of Lagash received an early warning from observers stationed at Eridu. The term used for these watchers was Igidu, meaning those who see first, a title often used for scouts or elevated sentries. Their warning gave the city enough time to organize a systematic response. The evacuation unfolded in 3 stages. The first phase was called Shudu, or the counting of hands. Historians interpret this as a full census. Every household was recorded. Families were divided into groups, and each group was assigned to a specific underground location, identified by a symbol meaning sealed dwelling beneath the earth. The second phase was named Gaba Ankur, meaning possessions were moved below. Grain, oil, livestock, water, seeds, and bronze tools were all transported underground before the people entered. The tablet even records exact quantities. Each family received 14 gur of barley. 1 gur equals roughly 300 liters. For around 25,000 households, that amounts to nearly 7.5 million liters of grain, enough to feed the population for more than a year. The final stage carried the name Igalba and Dub, translated as "the great doors were sealed." According to the text, enormous stone barriers rolled shut from the inside, permanently blocking the entrances. The Sumerian phrase for these gates was Narua Igal, meaning great stone mouth. They could not be opened from the surface. Whatever threatened the land above, the underground shelters were designed specifically to keep it out. The scribe records that 17 separate entrances across the Lagash region were sealed at the exact same time. 17 entrances. This was not a simple cave system. It was a massive underground network, carefully engineered, stocked with supplies, and activated according to a pre-existing plan. And that raises an even more disturbing question. How long had this plan existed? Was the underground system built quickly in response to an immediate disaster? Or had generations maintained it because they feared the affliction would eventually return? The third column strongly suggests the second possibility. One phrase implies that the underground refuge had been used before. This final section has reportedly caused intense debate among the few scholars who have seen al-Hashimi's transliteration. It describes the days after the entrances were sealed, told through the reports of watchers observing the surface through narrow ventilation shafts angled toward the sky. These shafts allowed airflow and limited visibility, but were far too small for anything to enter. For the first 3 days, the terrifying wailing roar echoed across the land in repeating cycles, growing louder and fading again, as though the affliction was sweeping back and forth over the region. Animals left above ground reportedly died within hours. The phrase used was Guninda Bausch, meaning they fell together, implying sudden and simultaneous death. Then, on the fourth day, the sound stopped completely. Silence covered the surface, but even then, the watchers refused to reopen the gates. According to the text, they witnessed something through the shafts that convinced them staying underground was safer. Part of the cuneiform is damaged here, but several lines remain readable. They describe a horrifying transformation in the sky itself. The light had changed. The term used was dalakur, combining the ideas of brightness and wrongness. Not darkness, not an eclipse, something else entirely. The world above had not simply become deadly. According to the tablet, it had been transformed. The air felt different. The light itself appeared unnatural. Everything on the surface had changed into something unfamiliar. Because of this, the watchers ordered the population to remain underground, and they waited. The text says they stayed below for a period called itesh, equal to roughly 3 months. Imagine it. Nearly 90,000 people trapped inside sealed underground chambers, surviving on measured grain supplies and carefully rationed water, surrounded only by stone walls and the sound of thousands of breaths echoing through the darkness. Then eventually, someone decided to reopen one of the entrances. The tablet states that a group known as the Luigi Zoo, translated as the knowing-eyed men, volunteered for the task. In other texts, the term refers to trained observers or specialized scouts. Exactly 7 men were chosen. The number is repeated carefully in the inscription, almost as if it mattered. The 7 men climbed back to the surface through one of the sealed shafts. And this is where the writing style of the tablet suddenly changes. Up until this point, the scribe had recorded events with almost mechanical precision, like an administrator documenting supplies and procedures. But now the language becomes emotional, almost mournful, as if even the writer struggled to describe what the scouts witnessed above. The fields had turned to ash, but not ash from fire. The tablet makes a clear distinction. The term used is sahar-dala, meaning shining dust. A strange, glowing residue coated the land. The rivers no longer looked normal either. The waters of the Tigris were described as having the color of copper. Buildings still stood, but every surface was covered in the luminous powder. Trees had been stripped bare. There were no birds, no insects, no sound at all. The silence itself terrified them. But the scouts did not retreat because of the ruined landscape. They turned back because within hours, 3 of the 7 began to fall sick. The symptoms are described with disturbing detail. Their exposed skin felt as though it was burning. They vomited repeatedly. Their strength disappeared rapidly. Confusion set in. The remaining 4 men carried the 6 scouts back underground before sealing the entrance once again. 2 of the 3 died a few days later. The 3rd survived, but permanently lost his eyesight. Over the following months, 2 more expeditions attempted to reach the surface. The outcome never changed. Burns, vomiting, weakness, death. And with each failed attempt, fewer volunteers were willing to go. The text eventually states that the surface had become the territory of the affliction. Whatever had descended from above was apparently gone, but the land itself remained poisoned. The soil, the rivers, the air, even the glowing dust covering the ruins, all of it carried some invisible danger. Exposure caused symptoms unlike anything found in surviving Sumerian medical texts. So the people of Lagash stopped trying to reclaim the surface. Instead, the tablet says they expanded deeper underground, connecting their tunnels with other subterranean systems farther to the southeast. The final surviving lines describe a society that slowly adapted to permanent life beneath the earth. They reorganized agriculture around underground water sources and kept every entrance permanently sealed. According to the inscription, this continued for 3 generations, and this is where the story becomes almost impossible to ignore. Because the symptoms recorded on the tablet do not closely resemble famine, plague, volcanic ash, or any ordinary natural disaster known to archaeology. Volcanic eruptions primarily destroy lungs and breathing first. Impact winters kill slowly through starvation. Ancient epidemics do not leave behind glowing dust. But the descriptions on the tablet align disturbingly well with something else: acute radiation exposure. Modern radiation sickness follows a very specific pattern: skin burns, severe vomiting, rapid physical collapse, blindness, and death within days or weeks, depending on the dose. Those are the exact same symptoms described on the tablet. The shining dust resembles radioactive fallout settling over the environment. The strange, altered light in the sky, dalakur, brightness mixed with wrongness, could reflect atmospheric distortion following an enormous radiation event. Even the copper-colored rivers may point toward chemical and environmental contamination. No accepted academic interpretation supports this conclusion publicly. But according to accounts surrounding the transliteration, the few scholars who reviewed the text discussed the possibility privately, and the implication was terrifying. The Sumerians may have recorded an event resembling radiation contamination thousands of years before modern civilization discovered nuclear technology. The tablet never mentions bombs or weapons. It only records the aftermath. But the aftermath is described with a level of medical accuracy that feels deeply unsettling, because the symptoms match conditions modern science only formally documented after Hiroshima in 1945. That leaves only 2 possibilities. Either the Lagash tablet is one of the most elaborate fabrications ever created in the field of ancient literature, or it is documenting something for which modern archaeology has absolutely no explanation. Ali al-Hashimi completed his transliteration in January 2022 and quietly shared copies with 3 trusted colleagues. One was based at the University of Pennsylvania, another at SOAS in London, and the third at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. The response from Pennsylvania was enthusiastic. A joint academic publication was even suggested for the Journal of Cuneiform Studies. The scholar in London requested high-resolution images before offering an opinion. But the Munich response was different. After remaining silent for 6 weeks, the researcher finally sent a short message warning that publication would be premature and insisting the artifact needed independent physical verification first. In March 2022, al-Hashimi submitted a preliminary paper to the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. The paper was returned without review. Officially, the journal claimed it could not accept work based on unpublished artifacts lacking institutional verification. That alone was not unusual. What happened afterward was, in June 2022, the Iraqi State Board of Antiquities suddenly reclassified the Lagash tablet into Restricted Access Category 2, a level normally reserved for nationally significant artifacts requiring ministerial approval. A forgotten tablet pulled from an unmarked crate in a flooded basement had suddenly been elevated into the same security category as some of Iraq's most important archaeological treasures. Al-Hashimi was informed that any future work on the artifact would require formal approval from a review committee meeting only twice per year. He was also asked to remove all photographs of the tablet from personal and institutional devices. Whether he complied remains unknown. Today, the artifact reportedly remains inside the Iraq Museum. No public catalogue number has been released. The transliteration survives only in the private files of 4 scholars. None of them have published it. And that is what makes the Lagash tablet so disturbing. It describes a living affliction descending from the sky, a carefully organized underground evacuation involving tens of thousands of people, a poisoned surface environment that remained deadly long after the event itself ended, symptoms matching acute radiation sickness, entire generations forced to survive beneath the earth. The tablet still sits in Baghdad, and the full truth behind it may still be buried with it. The Journal of Near Eastern Studies rejected the submission before it even reached formal review. Only a few months later, Iraqi authorities moved the tablet into a restricted classification category. Since then, none of the 4 scholars who examined the transliteration have published their findings publicly. None have given interviews. None have officially attached their names to an interpretation of the text. And the reason may be simple, because every possible explanation leads somewhere dangerous. If the symptoms described on the tablet truly resemble radiation exposure, then one impossible question immediately follows. What could have caused it nearly 4,000 years before the first nuclear detonation at Trinity in 1945? If the evacuation was organized in advance, then another question appears. Who warned the people of Lagash? And if the underground network already existed before the disaster began, then perhaps the most disturbing question of all is this: had something like this happened before? The tablet never explains. It simply records events with cold administrative precision, as though a government scribe applied the same careful method used for grain inventories and supply records to something far beyond human understanding. There is no dramatic commentary in the text, no mythology, no attempt to explain the event spiritually. The scribe only documented what he saw. He counted the population. He listed food reserves. He recorded the stages of the evacuation. He described the symptoms affecting survivors. And finally, he wrote down the outcome. Then the tablet was sealed away, buried beneath the ruins of a civilization that disappeared long before anyone alive could read its warning. For roughly 4,000 years, the inscription remained hidden in silence. Then it was uncovered. 4 scholars examined it, and according to everything known publicly, none of them chose to speak openly afterward. Which means the real question may no longer be whether the Lagash tablet is genuine. The real question is what happens if someone eventually decides that 4,000 years of silence has lasted long enough. Right now, the artifact reportedly remains in Baghdad. The entrances were sealed from the inside, and the record survived exactly as its scribe intended.